Your right arm, the sword at your side. I attempt to do only what you bid with me. I seek only to
raise the awareness of the need to change. If you already own a dog care facility where lots of dogs are playing on a regular basis, you'll know that regular grass, although beautiful and very friendly, often dies from disease, it dies from excess urine, it gets wet with puddles from rain, and it turns into a mud bath, and before long your pets are playing in a mud bath. And we now have a memorial park that is absolutely spectacular. The turf has just made it wonderful. Highly recommended Global Synthetic Turf. Once you've committed to the idea that you're going to spend the money to have your natural grass replaced with artificial turf, the very first step is to remove the existing material that's in your park. And so my suggestion is to take out, depending on the volume of dogs that are going to be playing in the park, up to 8, maybe even 10 inches of fill, so that you end up with a space that can then be packed with septic drain rock and other products we're going to talk about in a minute. There's actually quite a lot to this first stage of removing the fill that's there. You must be careful of existing sprinkler pipes, water lines, electrical wires, antennas, cables, whatever might be in the ground. You need to be very careful to identify all those things. If there are sprinkler zones, they need to be relocated outside of the perimeter of where the turf's going to be laid so that they're not physically, you don't have to dig it back up to get to it. If you encounter something that needs to remain in its current position, identify it and place it in a protective box or cabinet of some sort, and ultimately you can still cover it with the turf and allow yourself access at a later date. Once the fill has been removed to a measured grade, the next step is to bring in number 57 rock. It's essentially septic drain field rock. Very inexpensive product, and here's where you really want to be not thrifty. You want to be the exact opposite. You want to use a lot of this rock. Give yourself at least 6 to 8 inches of base rock compacted, and you're going to end up putting concrete screening over the top of this. But the very next step is to bring the rock in and approximate the level, and then go over it with a compactor, and follow that with concrete screening, which is a fine concrete dust, if you will, that can be laid on top of the septic drain rock and compacted as well. That'll be about a 4-inch bed. During the removal of the fill process, you're going to encounter places in your project that do not have a linear or a hard surface upon which to attach the turf. And so you're going to need to pour a concrete curb to give yourself that option. If you have existing sidewalks, they can be used nicely. Even existing paver walkways that have concrete edging can be used to attach the turf. But where there is nothing, you need to replace that with a concrete curb, probably a 4-inch wide curb, 6 to 8 inches deep, that allows you to tack the turf to the curb. Compacting the septic drain rock as well as the concrete screening is an essential part of this, and needs to be done very carefully and very meticulously. The rock should be moistened with water and tamped as wet rock, and ultimately once the septic drain rock is tamped down, you're going to lay this 4 to 5 inches of concrete screening on top and do the very same thing and tamp it down. It'll be a very hard surface, but a very pervious surface when you're finished. You want to take extra care to make sure the details are done correctly along the curb edge, around any objects that might be left behind, trees and the like. Sometimes will be in the middle of your park. You'll want to cut around those trees and then put some form of curb around them. And this part is very critical. Once you've finished placing the rock and tamping it down and doing all the primping that needs to be done, the next step is to roll out the carpet, and this is a very important step because the carpet needs to be rolled out so that the grain matches anywhere that you have to seam it together. You can't turn the carpet perpendicular to itself and end up with a good seam. And the company that worked for us did a great job. Coastal Synthetic Turf has some technicians that were able to make these seams completely invisible. So the carpet is laid out in its approximate location as a first step and trimmed to fit the location. Any place a seam is required with the dog turf, it's really, really important to take the time to make sure that the edges match up perfectly, and then a piece of double side or a large white piece of material is laid down and nailed to the ground, such that when the turf is applied to the top of the glue that will be laid on top of that, it will stick and create a perfectly nice seam. Once the seam is placed together on top of the glue, the carpet is actually nailed to the ground to ensure that it stays tight to the seam.
You guys want some agua? Water? I'll get you some water.
Once the seams are completely finished, large, heavy bags of sand in the bag for weight are laid across the seams to ensure that they hold up together. As always, during this process, there will be a lot of primping and trimming and edging to make things perfect, and that's critical. The details make all the difference. And the final stage here is to apply a silica quartz sand in quantity to really weight the carpet down to keep it from fluffing around, and then it's brushed in very aggressively with a broom to settle it into the carpet. The goal behind this entire process is to give yourself a fairly significant drain system beneath the carpet so that when water is applied to it in great quantity, it flows through the carpet and directly into the drain system. We've been using this turf now for the better part of 10 months, and some rainstorms have come through that were quite substantial, and we've had absolutely no flooding. There are no smell issues at all. We have large dogs running at high speeds, turning on a dime. The carpet's not separating, the carpet's not pulling apart anywhere. And clients, the perception that they have now of our park is that it looks like Augusta National Golf Course. Very impressed with Dave Moronic and his team for providing this turf for the Drake Memorial, because it's a very special thing for us here at Simmons Veterinary Hospital, and we now have a memorial park that is absolutely spectacular. The turf has just made it wonderful. Highly recommended Global Synthetic Turf.